Welcome to Fireside Giants, a featured podcast by Empire Sports Media. I'm your host, Alexander Wilson, and my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. Today, we have ESM's offensive line analyst and coach, Matt Giannettino, on to help us dissect the Week 1 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers and really what went wrong in the trenches and across the board for the Giants. There wasn't all negatives. There were some positives, and we're going to talk about all of it, break things down for you, and try and get you some knowledge and information into kind of what they struggled with and how we can improve moving forward. But to start things off, Anthony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm very disappointed about last night's loss, but I do think there was a lot of promise that was shown in that game, particularly from Daniel Jones. So I'm excited to discuss that and, look forward to next week. I think that it's another tough matchup, but if we could preview that, I don't know. I think we have a good chance on that one after last night's game.
And Matt, how you doing?
I'm good. Sorry about that. You didn't give me the cue right away, but I'm good. I guess I'm a little behind, but doing well. I thought to Anthony's point, I think that there was a lot to like with the Giants. Obviously it's always upsetting after a loss, but to be honest, I didn't have that feeling after this loss, like others, that I was disappointed and upset, and I'm harping on it over and over again. Again, a lot to like, and I think it's a really good building block moving forward. Even though they did lose.
Yeah, no, I agree. There were some positives that are going to put us in a position to grow. And that's really what we're looking for. 13 new starters, a new coaching regimen. Offensive line is pretty much brand new with a fresh new left tackle, center, and right tackle. What more can you ask from a team that really exerted as much energy as you could possibly imagine? Joe Judge even said it's going to take the first 4 weeks of the season to be in game shape. They were gassed by the end of the second quarter, and the second half they clearly weren't flying around like they were in the beginning, making plays and holding the Pittsburgh Steelers to under 10 points. Obviously, they went on a run, they scored 23 straight unanswered points, and they ended up losing the game, the Giants, that is. But there's a lot to talk about, and I kind of want to start off with the bread and butter, which was the offensive line. And really what happened there, Matt, was disappointing to see on multiple fronts. But what we saw from rookie Andrew Thomas was some were good, some was bad. But I want to ask you straight up, from what you saw with him, what were the things that you liked and the things that you really didn't like and saw, where he needs to work on moving forward?
Yeah, I think, guys, when you look at Andrew Thomas, there was a lot to like, more than not like. I think that he was good all around. He struggled a little bit early and occasionally, but he's going against Bud Dupree. A guy who has a really good pass rushing pedigree, who, when you look at this Steelers defense, guys, they're really multiple. When you look at what Pat Graham is trying to do on the defensive side of the ball, being multiple, that's what the Steelers want to do as well. They have guys in TJ Watt and Bud Dupree who can, they can rush in a 3-4 or, in a 4-3. They're very multiple. They do a really good job at it. They stunt quite a bit on the defensive line. One thing I saw from Andrew Thomas that I really liked was his patience and his pass sets. I thought he was very patient. He didn't lunge, which we saw a lot of out of Eric Flowers when he first came over out of Miami.
Don't say his name here.
I can't forget that, right? But I really liked his usage of his hands as well, which was a big problem for Andrew Thomas and one of his biggest criticisms coming out. So it's apparent that he worked on that in the offseason and worked with Mark Colombo as well. He did a really good job punching, using his hands, whether it's a one arm or a two arm. I saw some versatility out of his sets, whether he, quick set the defensive end or took a regular, vertical pass set. He did a really nice job. I thought his pad level was pretty low in the run game, which is important. He had some good finishes on that one Saquon run where Saquon kind of cut back up the middle towards the red zone there. He finished and put the guy on his butt. So he did a nice job. I think, more good than bad, actually. And considering he started off right at left tackle and was kind of thrown into the fire, I think he did a very nice job.
Absolutely. I think, he did look better than what I actually projected him to look against the Steelers with a really, really talented defensive front. Anthony can tell you all about them in a second. Bud Dupree, 11.5 sacks last year. TJ Watt, 14.5. And when you're looking at Saquon Barkley's run chart, a lot of the runs went to the right side where Cam Fleming was. He was actually forced from these inside zone runs, and then he was bouncing them outside because the pressure was almost immediate from the interior. There was not a lot of runs to Andrew Thomas's side, which is a little bit interesting. I'm not sure exactly why they did that. Maybe they just don't trust him yet. But Anthony, what do you think about Thomas and Saquon Barkley kind of just avoiding that entire side the entire night?
Well, I think that's really a Jason Garrett flaw. I think, if there's one thing that I didn't like about the offense last night, I thought Jason Garrett really could have been better. I think a lot of those run plays were very predictable. A lot of them came on first down and you knew it was coming, and the Steelers knew it was coming. The Steelers watched a lot of film, and because I was watching SportsCenter last night, I was doing homework and I was watching SportsCenter, and I was listening to the Steelers players post-game commentary. They were doing their press conferences, and they were saying pretty much that they knew what was coming. They knew exactly what the Giants were going to do, and they were already coming down to stop the run before the play even began, which is why, and this is actually some credit to Jason Garrett, Daniel Jones had a lot of success last night off of play action.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a positive to draw from it, but you got to be better in the run game. The offensive line needs to be better. It's very strange that they didn't run the ball to the left side. I think they only did it one time. I don't really fully get the reasoning behind it, because what they were doing was basically putting Evan Engram on the right side and using him as a lead blocker next to Cam Fleming. And I would think put Caden Smith on the left side and use him as a lead blocker next to Andrew Thomas. I feel like that would be the better alternative. But, I don't know. I'm just a little bit confused. I don't know if maybe there is some distrust that they have with Andrew Thomas. I know that I woke up this morning, I looked at the PFF grades. He had a higher run blocking grade than I think anybody else on the line last night. So maybe that's because he just didn't have as many run blocking reps that were like legitimate because they didn't run to the left side. But I guess he was run blocking the best. Maybe they should have followed behind him a few more times. I definitely think they should have.
Yeah, and Anthony, I just want to add to that real quick too. When you look at that, Andrew Thomas came from a program in Georgia where they run the ball plenty there with guys like Nick Chubb and DeAndre Swift, of course, who was drafted by the Lions this year. He's not coming from like Washington State, and Mike Leach, where they're throwing the ball 70 times a game. So he has a really good pro style, if you will, pedigree, and he's used to run blocking. I mean, I think that's one of his strengths. He started out on the right side and was really known as more of that mauler. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that's a little bit odd. And if you actually look, going back to the play action on the Darius Slayton touchdown, ironically, when Daniel Jones looks off that safety on the initial play action, the linebacker goes to Phil, and it's like they haven't ran the ball all game on you guys. Like, why are you even respecting the run game? Like, at this point, just sit back. And I think that they would have had that covered. Luckily for the Giants, to your point, and Jason Garrett deserves credit for that, but they did a really nice job, and they came right up and they were able to block it well, and Daniel Jones did a nice job of looking off the safety to get one-on-one coverage to Slayton. But yeah, they're very confusing for sure. I agree with you on that point.
Yeah, and just to hit on that pass protection, we saw Daniel Jones stand in the pocket for longer than I've seen a quarterback stand in the pocket for the Giants in the last 5 years. He had maybe 4 or 5 seconds at some points. That throw to Darius Slayton, he was hanging back there for a few seconds waiting for him to get downfield. That was a big tribute and should be, a big positive for Andrew Thomas. In pass protection, he held his own against Bud Dupree on numerous occasions. So I was really, really excited to see that. The tackles performed well in pass protection throughout the game pretty much. It was just the run blocking that was just terrible. And I think any troubles that they did have in pass protection, a lot of it fell on Saquon Barkley in his run, his pass blocking. He was awful stopping cornerback blitzes and really just picking up any stunts or anything, helping out in any way. He was just a liability all night back there. How do you think, Anthony, I'll start with you. How do you think that they combat that, like get Barkley to improve in that category? Because it seemed like maybe he was just shaking some rust off or something, but they had his number all night long.
I honestly don't know, because they haven't just had his number all night long. They've had his number all 2 years long. The guy has been bad in pass protection since his rookie year. I know he hasn't pass protected, or he didn't pass protect in college, but it's no excuse. Like, you have to start improving, and he's just not. I'm honestly getting very frustrated with Saquon Barkley. Like, he's promising us that he's going to improve his pass protection, but he's just not doing it. He just looks worse and worse. I'm like honestly super confused by it, because he's a guy that we know. Obviously, you look at his leg strength, you look at his strength of his body. He should be a force in pass protection, but he's just not. And he's a guy who keeps promising change, promising to get better, says he works so hard in the offseason. And I believe him, but at some point we got to see some results here. Like, he's got to get better in pass protection. He is a complete liability out there. I don't know what exactly you can do for it, because, you can't just sub him out. It's Saquon Barkley. You need him on the field as a receiver, as a runner. But in pass protection, he is just so bad. He gave up 2 sacks last night. I think that's probably more than any of the offensive linemen gave up. And I also want to mention, because you mentioned the pass protection was like pretty good on some plays. And I'll admit, like the pass protection was pretty solid for the Giants overall last night. Definitely better than the run blocking, which was an atrocity. But I give more credit to Daniel Jones for the way he stood in the pocket. He was extending plays. Sometimes he would drift back and extend the play and then find the guy. Sometimes he would step up and through the pocket. And he also, there was like 2 or 3 plays I noticed where he actually finally, and he never did this last year, he sensed some pressure coming from behind. And then I remember there was one play against Bud Dupree. He winds up to throw. He sees Bud Dupree out of the corner of his eye and immediately tucks it, puts 2 hands on it, and just moves forward and gains a couple extra yards. Right? They lost a yard. He was sacked, but it could have been a sack fumble 8 yards behind line of scrimmage. He recognized it and got forward. And I was just like, wow, this is a new player we're watching. This is a new Daniel Jones. He really did improve like he promised us he would. And back to Saquon Barkley, I haven't seen that promise be fulfilled yet. Daniel Jones has fulfilled that promise so far in week 1. I need to see Saquon Barkley improve in pass protection immediately because that is a very underrated thing for a running back. A lot of people don't bring that up, but that is very important. He needs to get better in that department.
No, 100%. And one thing, Matt, before I let you kind of get your take on it, I think Saquon's always had kind of a problem with his visual awareness. Even when you did the breakdown on him, Anthony, there were times where he would see a hole and he would jump into a hole that was completely clogged. That happens with him, and I think
too.
Exactly.
I saw him
he did it last night.
Twice last night.
Right, he did it last night, but also there was one sack on Jones where it was a cornerback blitz, and Andrew Thomas swings out left. Saquon Barkley gets stuck behind him trying to figure out where the cornerback's going to go. And this whole gap opens up on the right next to him on the right side, completely disregards it, and continues to follow Andrew Thomas's back, which made no sense to me. And he didn't fill the gap, and then that resulted in a sack. Now, Matt, from your perspective, was he trying to help the offensive line there and just kind of like chip Bud Dupree off the edge and didn't anticipate that cornerback blitz? Or is that Daniel Jones's responsibility to point him out? Whose job is it there?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a mix of things. I don't really know their scheme, right? I don't really know what Garrett is looking for, or Colombo's looking for, but just in a basic football sense, that could be on Gates, just calling out the front, or sometimes that's on Gates. It could be on Daniel Jones, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make much sense that the Giants would scheme Saquon Barkley on a defensive end and Andrew Thomas on the blitzing defensive back, right? It would be the other way around.
Right.
Big on big with Andrew Thomas and Bud Dupree, and then he takes most dangerous on the inside. And again, to your point, Alex, if he was going to, quote, chip him and whatever, he would chip and then probably go out for a route, right? He wouldn't just like chip him and stay there. So if he was chipping him, then he didn't do his job in going out for a route, most likely. And if he was going to chip him, it would be, again, even if it wasn't a route involved in it, then there wouldn't be a blitz either. Like, it would be just one of those things he kind of sits, checks, and then, hey, go find work, right? Something like that. One thing I wanted to bring up, guys, and this was interesting, what I noticed watching the film, again, last night, a lot of 5-man fronts from Pittsburgh, a lot of 5-man fronts, and they did a really good job of playing a spill defense, right? So that's bringing in those outside guys, the cornerbacks who come up and want to tackle, and then forcing it back inside to their playmakers and Watt, Dupree, Devin Bush, Cam Hayward, and they did a lot of that. Vince Williams looked fantastic last night, a guy I wouldn't think that, would look that good. One thing I did like, though, was they kind of played a little bit of tempo, and the Giants have always done really well with tempo, and I liked when they did that. And I hate when they go away from it, because even going back to Eli Manning's days, when they would go tempo, they had a lot of success. And I think we saw it again last night, and they went away from that. And I didn't really like it. Looking back, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but one thing I wanted to, give everyone an insight to, the second play of the game, Daniel Jones audibles, and he audibles it, and he says, Shanahan even, right? So just to kind of look into that, what that means, okay, Shanahan, when you look at Mike Shanahan, who was with the Denver Broncos, okay, really good job, him and Alex Gibbs, who was their offensive line coach, running outside zone. They kind of predicated the outside zone, Alex Gibbs and the Denver Broncos, back in the 90s with Terrell Davis. And again, even would mean to the right. Usually when they say even or odd, it means to the right. So Shanahan even meant that they were checking to outside zone to the right. So when he says that, boom, it was outside zone to the right. They picked up a few yards. But I think that was really interesting to kind of hear that, and just so if you guys hear that throughout the year, Shanahan even or anything like that, that could be exactly what that is. Just a little insight into, some audibles and kind of what those things mean for the listeners.
That's awesome. Really, really like that. They actually had one Eli. I don't
Yeah, I
remember the
heard
play
that.
exactly. I gotta go check it out and see the
Yeah.
legacy is still alive within their playbook.
Yeah.
Kind of funny to factor it into Jason Garrett's scheme.
Yeah.
But interesting. No, you're 100% right. There's a lot of different intricacies. The verbiage is completely different. It's gonna take time for this team to mesh. We know that. Now, actually, an interesting question for you before I want to get Anthony's opinion on some things. What do you think about Nick Gates and his involvement as the center? You mentioned it's his job to call out some of these schematic things and kind of notice what's going on at the line of scrimmage. Obviously he didn't do a very good job. Was there any positives, and what were the negatives that you noticed?
To be honest, I didn't see many positives from him, to be completely honest. I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer here, and I know it was his first start, but one thing I had down in my notes from watching the game over is he was overwhelmed. He looked very overwhelmed. Saw him kind of spinning around, kind of just getting olayed quite a bit, and even when he was uncovered, he didn't really help out all that much. And if he did, it was usually the wrong way that he went. He was out over his feet a lot, lunging. He would get pulled quite a bit. That's concerning, and I don't know if that's because his technique is bad or just, hey, it's a new position. And I'm going to go with the latter. It's a new position because I liked him at right tackle. To be honest, I'm not one of those guys who sits there and says, okay, let's just change up the line because you need some consistency. But if there's a time to do it, game number 2 sounds like a pretty good time to do it. And I'll tell you why. Because you still got 14 more games to go after that. It's not like we're halfway through the year or we're, at the end of the year now, let's try some new things out. This would be the time to do it. Put Pulley back at center, right? He's a veteran guy. He's played the position a ton, and put Nick Gates back out where he's comfortable. Again, you talk about Gates and Fleming being the problem yesterday. If you want to argue that, you put Cam Fleming back in his role as the swing tackle. You put Pulley back in a better position at center. And you put Gates back out where he's most comfortable at right tackle. I think that's the best 5 that should be on the field for the Giants.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I think that should be something they will be probably considering early on. Anthony, what do you think about Matt Parrott? Do you think that he'll get some playing time early on, maybe throw him in, get some just baptism by fire type of deal?
See, that's kind of tough. I personally, I've seen a lot of people today saying put him in next week. Let's start him at right tackle. Can't get much worse than Cam Fleming. I'm thinking that's a terrible idea because he's going to be lining up against Khalil Mack next week. I don't want to see Matt Parrott's first game just have him absolutely get demolished and ruin his confidence after he goes up against one of the best pass rushers in the last 20 years to play football. So I don't think that's a good idea. I think just remain patient. I know I'm kind of disagreeing with Matt here. I don't really want to see a switch up on the offensive line right now. I think just try and build some continuity, get some consistency going. Nick Gates, I'm a big fan of his. I just think maybe give him a couple more weeks, give him some time. If it's not turning around by week 4, then we start to think about moving the line around. If Cam Fleming is terrible by week 4, he just hasn't been good at all, sure, then we can start to think about Matt Parrott. Especially because when you look at the schedule, the first 4 weeks, we're going against some of the best pass rushers in the NFL each of those 4 weeks. But after that, It starts to ease up a little bit. So maybe once it starts to ease up, then let's work in the rookie Matt Parrott. But also with Nick Gates, he was definitely a disappointment last night, but he showed enough on the tape last year for me to say, let's just be patient with him. I'm still confident that he can turn it around. I just want to see him, have the chance to. So I'd say give him a few more weeks at center. And if he's not working out there, I think we already know he's solid at right tackle. He proved it in 2 starts last year. So then maybe we could think about moving him over there.
Yeah. No,
I think
that's a very good point.
Yeah, and sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to cut you off, but Anthony, I think that is a really good point. And to kind of, I guess, I don't want to contradict what I said, but going back on it, we talked about this before the show as well. Cam Fleming wasn't as bad as people want to make him out to be either. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Cam Fleming was an absolute disaster at right tackle. I actually think Gates was worse at center than Cam Fleming was at right tackle. So I would stick with Cam Fleming. But again, the Giants also did give Nick Gates an extension of some pretty good money, honestly, for a guy who was undrafted. You're going to think that he's going to get the first shot because he's here long term opposed to Cam Fleming, you would think. So again, if they are going to make the switch, maybe it's more for Nick Gates than it is for Cam Fleming. and maybe that's why they move him out to right tackle. But I agree. I think you gotta give him definitely a shot. But I think we should make it somewhat sooner in the season rather than later if they are going to make a switch at all.
I agree. I mean, Cam Fleming isn't a 1-year deal, and Gates just signed a multi-year contract, so making that change would have to be around Nick Gates. And what we saw yesterday was exactly what we expected, right? Joe Judge said, we're going to punch you in the nose. We're going to run the football. We're going to run it down your gut. They used bunch formations. They ran it. They tried to, utilize their offensive line strength. They're just guys were not able to hold up against a strong Steelers, Pittsburgh, defensive front. And with that being said, do you think, Matt, it's a better idea to spread out the offense, use more draw plays with Saquon Barkley, don't run these inside zones where against very talented defenses where they're just going to blow it up with strong linebackers who can shoot the gap? Like, they have to create some sort of mismatches. They have to spread the offense out so these cornerbacks can't get in there quickly. It just seemed like everything was so being pushed to the middle of the field, and they weren't able to maximize on Saquon's ability to bounce it outside and really get into space because he had no time to even get into any space to make a move.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think it kind of goes back to, what Anthony was saying in terms of Jason Garrett kind of being a little predictable. I think that we kind of all knew it was coming, and again, I think that they made the commentary on Monday Night Football about giving Jason Garrett credit for sticking with the run, which I agree with. We would get on Pat Shurmur quite a bit for not sticking it out or not playing Saquon enough, and I do think that they did a good job of sticking with the run, although they didn't do it. I would sit there and tell you that to be a little bit more creative, I would throw in a play more like duo rather than outside zone. And what duo does is duo creates as many double teams as possible on the line. The back would read one man over from the Mike linebacker. And if what happens is basically if that linebacker fills, the running back then bounces it. Okay. And if he doesn't fill and he flows, then you hit it up the middle. It's actually a really good play. And, some people kind of put this out there on Twitter. It was one of the plays where they went 3 tight ends. So it was 2 tight ends to the right, 1 tight end to the left. And they ran outside zone, again, going back to that Shanahan even, right? The outside zone